Remember when, we were kids, and, like, our biggest worry was just making it home before the streetlights came on. For 10-year-old Amber Barker, well, that simple freedom, it vanished one December evening back in 1997.
Yeah, leaving behind a really chilling mystery that still haunts Oklahoma City today. So we're gonna, take a deep dive into Amber's case. We're gonna sift through all the evidence and the theories and all those lingering questions that have, kept investigators and the community searching for answers for, gosh, decades now.
What's particularly striking about this case is how it reflects that, shift in societal perceptions of childhood safety. Back in the late 90s, the world was grappling with this growing awareness of the dangers that children face, and Amber's disappearance, it became like a tragic symbol of those anxieties. Yeah, absolutely. And it was the holiday season, a time when Oklahoma City was usually just like brimming with this festive cheer, right? Amber lived with her mom, Bonnie, in a neighborhood where, like, everyone knew each other. It felt safe. It felt like a place where kids could still, ride their bikes without a worry in the world.
Yeah, that sense of community, it's so important to understanding the impact of Amber's disappearance, right? It just shattered that illusion of safety, leaving everyone to wonder, like, could this happen to my child?
Exactly. Now, Amber, eh, she was your typical fourth grader,
Yeah.
a bit of a teacher's pet who loved being a hall monitor. But she was also like a tomboy who enjoyed, you know, tinkering with cars with her dad. And she
Sure.
dreamed of becoming a veterinarian.
Yeah.
The girl loved animals. But she also had this like deep-seated fear of the dark. Wouldn't even sleep in her own room. She and Bonnie, they would often like fall asleep on the couch together watching movies.
Oh, that detail about her fear of the dark is so poignant, almost like a foreshadowing of the terror she might have experienced that night. It adds another layer of vulnerability to her story.
It really does.
Ugh.
Okay, so December 18th, 1997, a seemingly ordinary Thursday began like any other. Amber went to school, came home, and then around 3:30 p.m., she hopped on her blue bike and rode a few miles north to visit a friend. And this was routine for Amber, a trip she made almost daily.
Yeah, this established routine, it's crucial because it emphasizes the deviation from the norm when Amber doesn't return home as expected. It immediately raises red flags.
Right. Bonnie had this be home before sunset rule, and Amber, he was a stickler for rules, always followed them to a T. But sunset came and went, 5:45 p.m. rolled around, and still no Amber. So Bonnie starts to worry, and then the phone rings. It's Amber, apologizing for being late, saying she just lost track of time.
This phone call is a pivotal moment in the story. It provides, a confirmed last point of contact, but it also introduces this element of unease. You mentioned Amber's fear of the dark, and she was specifically nervous about riding her bike home in the dark.
Exactly. Bonnie tried to reassure her, told her not to worry. It was just a short ride. They hung up, and Bonnie expected Amber home any minute, 10 minutes, tops, right. But 6:10 p.m. comes and goes, no Amber. 6:30 p.m., still no Amber. At this point, Bonnie knows something is terribly wrong.
That shift, from rationalizing the delay to that gut-wrenching realization that something is amiss, it's a feeling I think a lot of parents can relate to. It's that moment when everyday concerns turn into like sheer panic.
Absolutely. Bonnie jumps in the car, drives towards a friend's house, frantically scanning the streets, hoping to spot Amber on her blue bike.
But nothing.
She starts making calls. Friends, family, anyone who might have seen Amber. And the friend confirmed that Amber left right after that phone call. No lingering, no delays. It's like she vanished into thin air.
That detail, it's chilling. It shuts down the possibility of a simple miscommunication or a change of plans. The mystery just it deepens.
And with no sign of Amber, Bonnie does what any parent in that situation would do. She calls 911. The police, they respond quickly, recognizing that this isn't a typical runaway case. Amber has no history of that, no reason to disappear.
What's interesting here is how the police immediately treat this with, the gravity it deserves. They don't dismiss it as like a teenage escapade. They sense that something is seriously wrong.
Right. At first, they consider the possibility of a hit and run, a tragic accident, but there's no sign of Amber at local hospitals.
Mhm.
Then, the next morning, they find her bike leaning against a tree in Denton Park. It's undamaged, ruling out the accident theory.
Yeah. The discovery of the bike, it's significant for a couple of reasons, right? It places Amber in a familiar location, but it also raises a huge question. Why would she detour to the park after dark? Especially after, expressing fear of riding in the dark, it just doesn't add up.
It's one of the many baffling aspects of this case. And it's this detail, combined with the lack of any other leads, that pushes the police to consider a more sinister possibility, kidnapping.
This marks a turning point in the investigation, right? Shifting from accidental scenarios to the possibility of foul play.
And the case explodes. It becomes a media blitz. News coverage, flyers plastered everywhere, appeals for information from anyone who might have seen something. One man comes forward claiming he saw a girl matching Amber's description with a blue bike, talking to a boy selling candy around 5:20 p.m. It seems like a promising lead.
This false lead, while ultimately unhelpful, it demonstrates the public's, eagerness to assist and highlights the community's growing concern. Everyone wants to find Amber.
But there's a problem. We know Amber was still at her friend's house at 5:20 p.m., confirmed by the phone call and the friend's statement. Wrong girl. It's back to square one. And then, 2 days after Amber disappears, a woman calls the police. She found a shoe, a no-excuses sneaker, just like the ones Amber was wearing. Bonnie confirms. It's Amber's shoe. It was found 20 blocks south of their home, miles from the park.
The discovery of the shoe, it's a crucial development. It provides a tangible piece of evidence linked to Amber, and it shifts the geographical focus of the search. But it also, raises more questions than answers.
And it's just the beginning. The police, they find the other shoe a few blocks from the first one. Then her beige sweater's found in some bushes. A sock is discovered. And one of Amber's sisters, she finds her silver ring on the side of the street. It's as if someone scattered these items across several blocks like a trail of breadcrumbs leading nowhere.
This scattering of items, it's incredibly unsettling, right? It suggests a deliberate attempt to mislead investigators, or even, more disturbingly, a callous disregard for the victim.
It's a truly chilling detail. And as if the scattered belongings weren't unsettling enough, there's more. There's vomit on Amber's sweater. And inside the vomit, the police, they find something they believe could be semen. There's also a tiny speck of blood on one of her shoes.
These details, while, difficult to hear, they're crucial to understanding the potential gravity of the situation. They point toward a possible sexual assault, adding a layer of urgency and horror to the investigation.
It's a horrifying thought. The blood sample was too small for DNA testing at the time, but the police concluded, based on the other evidence, that Amber's abductor was likely male. This narrowed down the potential perpetrator pool, but it didn't lead them directly to a suspect, at least not at first.
It's like piecing together a puzzle with missing pieces, right? You have these fragments of information, but they don't quite form a complete picture.
Exactly. And then, remember those blue fibers found on Amber's sweater? Well, they matched the blue interior of a car belonging to someone very close to the family. Daniel Smith, the ex-boyfriend of Amber's sister, Debbie.
The introduction of Daniel Smith as a person of interest, it marks a significant shift in the narrative. The blue fibers, they offer a potential physical connection between Amber and Daniel, and it immediately raises suspicion.
Especially when you consider the kind of relationship Daniel and Debbie had. It was tumultuous, to say the least. They had a daughter together, even a common-law marriage, but they fought constantly. Debbie eventually took their daughter and fled to Oregon, hiding from Daniel.
Yeah, Daniel's volatile relationship with Debbie, it adds a layer of complexity to the case, potentially providing, a motive for revenge or a desire to regain control.
On the day Amber disappeared, Daniel was at Bonnie's house, trying to find Debbie and his daughter. He was actually there when Amber called Bonnie, saying she was heading home. And guess what? Right after that call, Daniel leaves.
This timing is certainly suspicious. It raises questions about, whether Daniel overheard the call and if that knowledge influenced his subsequent actions. Did he follow Amber?
That's what investigators wanted to know. Daniel claimed he went to a club for a beer after leaving Bonnie's house and then, continued searching for Debbie, but the police couldn't verify his alibi. Nobody remembers seeing him at the club. Add that to the blue fibers, and things aren't looking good for Daniel.
The lack of a corroborated alibi, it further increases suspicion surrounding Daniel, making him, a prime focus for investigators. But as we'll see, this case is full of twists and turns.
It really is. And just when you think the evidence is pointing in one direction, another piece of the puzzle emerges that throws everything into question.
This is where the case takes an unexpected turn, right? Remember, Daniel was at Bonnie's house when Amber called. But Bonnie insists Daniel left hours before that call, so he couldn't have heard the conversation. Wouldn't have known Amber was alone, riding her bike in the dark.
So wait, are we saying there's a chance Daniel might actually be in the clear?
Well, it's not that simple. Joseph Bishop, the boyfriend of Amber's other sister, Brandy, he contradicts Bonnie's statement. He was also at the house that day and claims Daniel was definitely there for Amber's call. overheard it, and left immediately after, heading in the same direction as Amber. Now, whose memory is more accurate? It's hard to say.
So we've got conflicting accounts from people who are actually there. That's got to be frustrating for investigators.
Absolutely. Eyewitness testimony can be, unreliable, especially in high-stress situations. Memories can be influenced by a variety of factors, so it's possible that Bonnie or Joseph's recollections are distorted.
Mhm.
But what's interesting is that Joseph, he passed a polygraph test, making his statement seem more credible.
Okay. So we've got blue fibers, suspicious timing, conflicting accounts, and Joseph's polygraph results. All of this paints, a pretty incriminating picture for Daniel.
It does, yeah. But to fully understand the weight of this evidence, we need to delve into Daniel's past. Just a month before Amber vanished, there was a domestic disturbance call at Daniel and Debbie's house. Debbie told the police that Daniel hit her when she refused to have sex with him.
That's disturbing. It suggests a pattern of, violence and aggression, making his potential involvement in Amber's disappearance even more concerning.
Exactly. And it gets worse. 2 years before Amber's disappearance, Daniel was convicted of attempted kidnapping. A woman was leaving a club when Daniel jumped out from behind her car, grabbed her keys, opened the door, and tried to force her inside, even choking her. She managed to escape and call the police.
Wow. This is serious stuff. This isn't just a guy with a temper. This is like a clear escalation of violent behavior.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that someone with this kind of history wouldn't be considered a serious suspect.
Daniel claimed he was just trying to steal the car, but he was charged with kidnapping and intimidating a witness after threatening a bouncer who testified against him. He eventually took a plea deal, got a 5-year deferred sentence, went to boot camp for 4 months, and was put on probation.
So despite his violent past, he was given a second chance. It makes you wonder if, the system failed to recognize the potential danger he posed.
It's a question worth considering. He seemed to be getting his life together after that, going back to school, getting his GED, attending AA meetings. But then Amber disappears. And remember how Amber told her dad and brother that she was scared of Daniel?
Yes. She said he tried to shove her into his car the day before she vanished, and that she had seen him driving by their house, seemingly watching her.
This fear is a critical piece of the puzzle. It provides a direct link between Amber's apprehension and Daniel, suggesting a history of unsettling behavior that goes beyond, mere dislike. These weren't just like childish fears. Amber was genuinely afraid of him.
It's heartbreaking to think about what she might have gone through. So with all this evidence mounting against him, the police bring Daniel in for questioning and right.
They do. He doesn't confess, but he doesn't exactly clear himself either. They ask him to take a polygraph test with the FBI, and he agrees. But on the day of the test, he's a no-show. He also misses his AA meeting, violating his probation.
That's a huge red flag. It screams guilty conscience. If he were innocent, why run?
Daniel's failure to appear for the polygraph, it's a highly suspicious move. It suggests a fear of exposure, a possible attempt to avoid incriminating himself. The police, they go looking for him, but he's vanished. Then, on December 21st, his car is found abandoned at a gas station. Inside, they find brown hair, like Amber's hair.
This discovery, while circumstantial, must have felt like a punch to the gut for Amber's family. It strengthens the connection between Daniel and Amber, even though it doesn't definitively prove his guilt.
Right. It adds to the growing mountain of evidence against him. And the story takes another tragic turn the following morning. On December 22nd, a neighborhood watch group, they find Daniel in a park, less than a mile from his car. He's dead. An apparent suicide.
Oh, wow. Talk about a bombshell. Yeah. This dramatic turn of events must have thrown the investigation into chaos.
It did. Daniel's death, assuming it was suicide, brought the investigation to a screeching halt. Even though the police and FBI worked tirelessly, through Christmas and New Year's, they found no trace of Amber. Bonnie clung to hope at first, believing Amber would walk back through the door, but as time went on, reality set in.
Imagine the agony of not knowing what happened to your child, coupled with the suspicion that the man who might have been responsible is gone. It's unimaginable.
It's a truly horrific situation, and the circumstances surrounding Daniel's death raise their own set of questions, right? Was it a genuine suicide?
Yeah.
Driven by guilt over what he'd done, or was there a possibility of foul play, as some have suggested? His death took whatever secrets he might have had to the grave.
So even though the police never officially named Daniel a suspect, the evidence against him was pretty damning.
It's hard to deny that. The blue fibers, the suspicious timing, the conflicting accounts, his violent past, his disappearance, the hair in his car, and then his death, it all points towards a A very dark conclusion.
Over the years, the police, they would release age-progressed photos of Amber, hoping for, a break in the case.
Yeah.
But nothing substantial ever came up. It seemed like the case had gone cold.
This unresolved ending, it's often the reality of cold cases, right? The lack of answers, it leaves a void for Amber's family and a lingering question for the community. What happened to Amber Barker?
But this is where the story takes another twist. The tragedy surrounding Amber's disappearance, it didn't end with Daniel's death. In 2007, Amber's dad, Robert, he passed away, never knowing what happened to his daughter. Then in 2013, another tragedy struck the family. Amber's sister, Brandy, died under mysterious circumstances.
Brandy's death adds a layer of, unsettling coincidence to this already tragic story. It makes you wonder, could there be a connection, however improbable, between her death and Amber's disappearance?
It's certainly a question worth exploring. So what happened to Brandy?
She had moved to be with her boyfriend, who then promptly dumped her, leaving her stranded, no job, no money, no place to live. She ended up staying in a trailer belonging to a man who was in the hospital.
That sounds like a desperate situation. It's easy to see how someone in her position could become vulnerable.
And then a series of severe storms, including tornadoes, hit the area. Brandy was found dead in a ditch, her clothes scattered around her. The police ruled that she drowned after getting caught in one of the storms. It seems like a tragic but explainable accident.
It makes sense given the weather conditions. But if that's the case, why are we even discussing Brandy's death? It seems, unrelated to Amber's disappearance.
Here's the thing. People who knew Brandy disputed the storm theory. They said there wasn't a storm that night. Plus, Brandy, she had a serious head injury, not the kind you'd get from, flying debris.
Now, that's strange. It definitely raises questions about the official explanation for her death. Was it truly a tragic accident, or were there other factors that contributed to her demise?
It's hard to say for sure. Brandy, she did have a history of drug use, so one theory was that she got high, wandered out of the trailer, passed out, hit her head, and either overdosed or drowned.
That's a sad but plausible scenario. But is there anything to suggest foul play?
Her sister, Debbie, she believed the accidental overdose theory, but she also mentioned that Brandy's ex-boyfriend was bad news, claiming he had attacked Brandy a month before her death, beating her up and cutting her throat.
Whoa. That's terrifying. So we have an ex-boyfriend with a history of violence and a death with, some unexplained circumstances. It's hard not to consider the possibility that Brandy's death wasn't an accident.
Exactly. And some people believe Brandy was murdered and that her death was covered up, given her drug use and the convenient excuse of, the storms.
It's certainly possible. But without more evidence, it's just speculation. Sadly, just a year after Brandy died, their mother, Bonnie, she passed away from natural causes. She never got any answers about what happened to Amber or Brandy.
It's a heartbreaking end to a truly tragic story. Bonnie always maintained that Daniel had something to do with Amber's disappearance, that he likely killed her. But she also held on to that, sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, Amber was still out there somewhere.
That unwavering hope is something I think we can all admire, even in the face of such devastating loss. But if Daniel was responsible, why would he target Amber in the first place? What was his motives?
That's a key question, and one that investigators have grappled with for years. Remember Daniel, he was desperately searching for Debbie and his daughter. It's possible that he saw Amber as a way to get back at Debbie, to hurt her in the most unimaginable way. Or perhaps in his twisted mind, he believed that kidnapping Amber would somehow force Debbie to return to him.
It's chilling to think about the kind of logic that might drive someone to commit such a heinous act. And to make matters even more complicated, remember Debbie, Daniel's ex? She always insisted on his innocence.
Debbie's unwavering belief in Daniel's innocence is intriguing, especially given the circumstances. It raises questions about what she knows and why she remains so steadfast in her defense of him.
It's almost as if she's protecting him, even after all these years. She even claimed to know who the real kidnapper was, saying they got away with it and were still alive. But she never named names.
That's a tantalizing piece of information, right? It suggests that there might be more to this story than meets the eye, that there are, secrets being kept hidden. Debbie also claimed that Daniel's death wasn't suicide. that he was murdered by the same person who took Amber, and his death was staged to look like a suicide.
That's a bold claim. Is there any evidence to support her theory, or is this just, wishful thinking, a desperate attempt to clear Daniel's name?
It's hard to say. The police haven't publicly commented on Debbie's claims, and there's no concrete evidence to corroborate her story. But it does add another layer of intrigue to this already complex case. And then in 2015, there was a development that gave investigators renewed hope. The police announced they were collecting DNA from a man named Forrest Rice, who was best friends with Daniel.
This sounds promising. New DNA technology, a potential new suspect. Could this be the break they've been waiting for?
It certainly had that potential. Daniel and Forrest were together on the day Daniel died, and allegedly they were also hanging out on the evening Amber disappeared and the following day.
Okay, so Forrest is directly linked to Daniel during the crucial time frame of Amber's disappearance. What's his story? Does he admit to seeing Amber that day?
Interestingly, Forrest's account contradicts Daniel's story. Remember, Daniel claimed he was searching for Debbie and had a beer at a club that night. Well, he didn't mention being at Forrest's house.
So we've got two guys, best friends, with conflicting alibis for the night in his life. Amber disappeared. It's hard to believe they weren't involved in some way.
Right, and the police were adamant that Forrest wasn't a suspect, saying they just wanted to question him because he might have information about what happened.
That seems odd. If they truly believed he was just a potential witness, why collect his DNA?
That's the million-dollar question. By 2015, DNA technology, it had advanced, and they were able to extract a partial DNA profile from the possible semen found on Amber's sweater. They compared Forrest's DNA to this sample, as well as to the blood on her shoe. It seemed like they were finally getting close to the truth.
So what were the results? Did Forrest's DNA match the evidence?
To this day, the police have never publicly confirmed whether or not there was a match. They haven't cleared Forrest, but they haven't named him as a suspect either. It's a frustrating lack of closure for everyone involved.
And just like Daniel, Forrest wasn't exactly an angel. He had multiple charges against him. Assault, battery, even cooking meth.
His criminal history adds another layer of suspicion to this already tangled web. Could Forrest have been involved in Amber's disappearance? Perhaps even acting in concert with Daniel? We may never know for sure. But there's one more person we need to talk about. Joseph, the one who was dating Brandy back in 1997 and was at Bonnie's house the day Amber went missing.
Joseph. We haven't heard his name in a while. Why is he back in the picture?
Remember, he's the one who insisted that Daniel was there for Amber's phone call and left immediately after, contradicting Bonnie's memory.
Right. His account seemed to solidify Daniel's position as the prime suspect. But if the police are now looking at Forrest, why bring Joseph back into the mix?
It's intriguing, isn't it? In the years after Amber's disappearance and Daniel's death, the police, they treated Joseph like a person of interest. It's unclear why, but they were definitely suspicious of him.
So there's something about Joseph that we don't know. Something that made the police suspicious enough to consider him a person of interest. What could it be?
That's the mystery. There might be information about Joseph that hasn't been made public, information that could potentially shed light on his possible involvement.
It's frustrating that we don't have all the pieces of the puzzle.
I agree. It's like we're looking through a foggy window, trying to make sense of the shapes we see. Joseph, of course, denies any involvement, claiming he has no idea why the police would suspect him. He even took a polygraph test and passed, just like he did back in 1997.
2 polygraph tests and no confession. You have to wonder, is he telling the truth? Or is he a master manipulator, able to convince the polygraph he's innocent?
It's a good question, and it highlights the limitations of polygraph testing. While they can be a useful tool, they're not foolproof.
So where does that leave us with Joseph? Is he a credible witness? A potential suspect? Or just a guy who got caught in the crossfire of a tragic situation?
It's hard to say. When asked about Joseph, the police basically said the same thing they said about Forrest. He's not a suspect, but he might know something. But again, why the intense scrutiny if he's just a potential witness?
It seems like they're holding back information, which only adds to the, mystery and frustration surrounding this case.
You're right. It feels like we're getting closer to the truth, but there are still so many unanswered questions.
I mean, it's mind-boggling, right? We've got Daniel, the ex-boyfriend with the violent past, suspicious behavior, who, dies before he can clear his name. And then there's Forrest, his best friend, also with his own criminal history, who might have been with Daniel during the, crucial hours when Amber vanished. And now Joseph. The seemingly innocent bystander who the police, well, they seem to have their eye on him for reasons we just don't fully understand. It's like a twisted maze with no clear path to the truth.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. The sheer number of potential leads, the conflicting accounts, it makes this case, well, incredibly challenging to unravel. And what's even more heartbreaking is that despite all these years, Amber Barker has never been found. No body.
Yeah.
No definitive answers.
It's a tragedy for her family and for the community.
Yeah.
Imagine living with that kind of uncertainty, never knowing what truly happened to your loved one. Gosh, it's got to be agonizing.
Absolutely. And while the police haven't officially named a suspect, they maintain that the case isn't closed. They're still investigating, hoping that, new technology or fresh perspective might uncover something that was missed all those years ago.
You have to admire their dedication.
Yeah.
They haven't given up on Amber, even after all this time. It makes you wonder if there are any, promising avenues they might be exploring now.
Well, advancements in DNA technology have been a game changer in many cold cases. Remember that partial DNA profile they extracted from Amber's sweater?
Hmm.
Perhaps they're, re-examining that evidence with new techniques, hoping to get a more complete profile or to find a match in DNA databases.
That would be incredible. A DNA match could finally crack this case wide open. But even if there's, no new physical evidence, maybe they're revisiting old witness statements, looking for inconsistencies or connections they might have missed the first time around.
Exactly. Sometimes a seemingly insignificant detail that was overlooked years ago can suddenly become crucial in light of, new information or a different perspective.
I guess that's what keeps hope alive for Amber's family and for everyone who has been touched by this story. The possibility that someday someone might come forward with the missing piece of the puzzle, the clue that finally leads to the truth.
This case is a powerful reminder that even decades-old mysteries can be solved. It's a testament to the persistence of investigators, the advancements in forensic science, and the importance of never giving up hope.
Amber's case is a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of children and how easily innocence can be shattered. It's a story that stays with you. The image of a young girl, her blue bike abandoned in a park, her belongings scattered like breadcrumbs, leading nowhere.
What's particularly haunting is the lack of a definitive answer. Did Daniel commit this crime and take his secrets to the grave? Was there another perpetrator lurking in the shadows? Someone Debbie knows but refuses to name. Or could it be someone we haven't even considered? The possibilities are as endless as they are unsettling.
So many questions linger. Was Daniel involved? What about Forrest or Joseph? Could a stranger have been responsible? What if the strange circumstances surrounding Brandy's death? Did those events somehow tie into Amber's disappearance, or were they tragic coincidences? We may never know the answers to these questions, but one thing is certain. Amber's memory lives on, urging us to never give up the search for justice and to cherish the preciousness of life.
And if anyone listening has any information, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, please share it with the authorities. Perhaps together we can finally bring closure to this haunting mystery.
It's a long shot, but you never know. Sometimes the smallest detail can make all the difference. Keep Amber's story alive. Talk about it, share it, and never forget her name. Even in the face of tragedy, hope endures.